Good evening, everybody. Welcome for those on Zoom, and a special shout out to those of you in front of me. Thank you for being here. Before I start, I just want to say what an absolutely beautiful town Reading is. I drove from Ridgefield RVNAhealth, where I work, to here, and I just felt like it was an adult Disneyland. It was beautiful. I am from Southington, Connecticut, so I'm not used to that many trees and unique houses, and it was really a really pleasant experience. So today we are going to be talking about, let's see if we can get this thing working. We're going to be talking about gut feeling, nourishing your digestive system for better health. So as mentioned, a little bit about me. I am a registered dietitian. I got my undergraduate and my graduate degree from the University of Connecticut. I also have that image up there, which is me as a diver. I was also an athlete at UConn. And the reason I like to mention it is not so much because I'm in sports nutrition at the moment, but that is what really brought me into the world of nutrition and health back when I was 12 years old, and sort of steered and influenced my decision to major in nutritional sciences. Additionally, I have certifications from Monash University, which is sort of pioneer of the low FODMAP diet. If you don't know what the low FODMAP diet is, I will touch on it briefly. Consider yourself lucky. It is a very complex diet that is used to manage symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome. And it's a very complex diet that should always be done under a dietitian's care. So I do have a special ongoing education in that as well. So I really want to mention and be fully transparent and say I am a digestive health dietitian, but I've also experienced digestive issues. I've experienced H. pylori, SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and also intestinal permeability, which you now may hear as the term leaky gut, which I don't love. But that was really what brought my interest into the world of digestive health in the first place. And it's not to say that all digestive diseases can be prevented, because that's not true. But I am sharing information with you today that I wish I knew sooner. Plus, the word gut health and gut this and probiotics and prebiotics has sort of taken over the media. So I hope to be very informative on what is worth your money and your effort and really what is not, and where we can sort of pull back. So with that, let's talk about the very foundation of our gut. So gut health. I mean, I wish I could see the audience on the Zoom, but I've only got the audience here. How many people have heard the term gut health? Lots. So the definition of gut health means something a little bit different for everyone, but there is an actual clinical definition, and it's defined by the Lancet as the absence of GI symptoms. So that could be pain, bloating, diarrhea, constipation. Forewarning, we are going to be talking about poop, so just everyone be prepared for it. An absence of disease, inflammatory bowel disease, colon cancer, as well as the absence of other unfavorable local conditions, including increased intestinal permeability. Hi, here, I get that one. Mucosal inflammation, and or deficiency or abundance of short chain fatty acids. So basically having a healthy gut microbiome. That is a lot. So your gut has 10 main organs, but I sort of highlighted the ones here where usually get us into the most trouble. We've got the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, and the large intestine. So the large intestine is actually where our gut microbiome resides. What is our gut microbiome? So that is the 2 to 3 pounds of bacteria that is living in your large intestine. And it is so important for our overall health. You take that bacteria, you take those microorganisms out, you're no longer living. They cannot live without you. You cannot live without them. It's also important to know as well that there's more than just bacteria that are living in our large intestine, in our gut microbiome, fungi and other different microorganisms as well. Gut microbiome plays a role in immune and metabolic function, and has even been linked to mental health. So numerous studies show that changes in your gut microbiome can affect your mental health. And I'm going to share a very interesting one with you now. And because the reason I like to highlight this study is because it really shows the importance of the gut microbiome, which, guys, remember, and I can't say this enough, that the gut microbiome is just one piece of this very complex gut and digestive system. However, I do want to share this study with you. So this was called the SMILES trial. And what they did was they wanted to look at the role of diet and mental illness, specifically depression. And they got two groups of people, both with clinical depression, and they put one in a dietary intervention group led by dietitians, and they put another in a social support group. So it wasn't behavioral therapy per se, it wasn't traditional therapy, but it was social support. And after 12 weeks, they found that the group in the intervention trial the dietary intervention trial had significantly improved symptoms compared to the group in the social support. And about 30% of the participants reached full remission of their depressive symptoms. So that really, begged the question, well, what is causing this? And after more and more research, they really determined that the primary role or one major role of how changing our diet was influencing our mental health was from the gut microbiome. So that's really just to say and show how important the gut microbiome is. But what I want to also draw your attention to is that if things are not happening adequately and properly, there's not proper digestion and absorption happening upstream, there's likely we're gonna experience deficiencies downstream. So we're going to talk about how to minimize that and how we can optimize our gut health with nutrition. So another thing I really want to draw your attention to before we get into what you can actually do to improve your overall health is I want us to understand the importance of this clinical hierarchy. So what does that mean? So that sort of is referring to what I talked about earlier, how if things are not happening well upstream, they're probably not going to be happening well downstream, right? So first things first is we want our digestion to function properly, right? We want to be able to chew our food. It's a thing we don't even think about. We want to be able to chew our food well, swallow it. We want it to then be in our stomach and have the right stomach acidity to sort of break it down. Who knew that stomach acid was actually so important and it was antimicrobial, right? So sometimes when people get bad bugs in their stomach, it's because they don't have enough stomach acid to break down all the foods and the bacteria that we consume. We also want to make sure we're having adequate motility. That basically means that the food is moving from our stomach to our small intestine and to our large intestine. So as you can tell, this is all the function of our gut. Enzymes are being released, things are being absorbed when they should. That's that very baseline piece that if we're experiencing symptoms or just want to optimize gut health, right? You certainly don't need to be here if you're not experiencing symptoms. This is for everybody. They made this presentation for everybody. But where does it start? It starts with optimizing the function of your digestion. Then we can sort of go into tier 2 where we see healthy immune response, right? So we want to make sure that the integrity of our intestinal tract is set up to keep the things inside the intestinal tract where they should be and allow for adequate nutrient absorption, right? And then lastly, we have the gut microbiome, right? So that's that very, very tip of the pyramid that we can then optimize. So a healthy gut microbiome, what does that mean? That means we have adequate gut bacteria diversity. So in a gut microbiome, you want to make sure things are diverse. You want to have absence of pathogens. You also want to make sure it's even. If you think about any rainforest, right? You want to have so many different species there. You also don't want to have one species that's overpowering another. And then this last one is, believe it or not, when we sort of feed our bacteria in our gut microbiome, it actually produces something called short chain fatty acids. So even the stuff that goes your body is crazy. It just never stops working. So all the way in your large intestine, we have certain foods that these bacteria feed off, and then they produce a byproduct, again, called short chain fatty acids, which can actually cross the intestine and go into our blood, where they have beneficial effects on our immune system, our mental health, and our metabolic health. So, leads me to my next point. Gut health, and again, I'm not just talking about the gut microbiome. It's certainly included, but it's the function, it's the inflammation, it's the gut microbiome, all influences these main aspects of health. So we know that an optimal gut health is associated with decreased risk of mental illness, decreased symptoms of depression, reduced risk of digestive disorders, right? I mean, of course, inflammatory bowel disease, but of course, cancers. And then the big one, diverticulitis. Anybody been in the hospital with diverticulitis or have a colonoscopy and find that they've got a polyp, right? We don't want those polyps to be inflamed. So of course, and interestingly enough, gut health can be associated with reduced or improved outcomes with arthritis, longevity, and reduced overall inflammation. Important to note that there is a bidirectional communication between your gut and your mind. And so that is one reason why they were, suspecting that mental illness, like, hey, we can look at mental illness differently. We can look at it from the gut and how it affects the mind. But does another more relatable example, perhaps, anybody get really nervous, maybe before a test, or if you were thinking back when you maybe played sports? I know I did, certainly relatable to me. And you get nervous and immediately it goes to your stomach. Or I hate to bring this up, but any bad breakups, what happens? You don't want to eat, right? Sometimes. So that is just one way that, did you say I want to eat? You want to eat? Yeah, everybody reacts differently. Everyone reacts differently. Fair enough. So that is just one way that there is that bidirectional communication. Your gut's talking to your brain is talking to your gut. And so, of course, dysregulation of the gut microbiome has been linked to a number of immune-mediated diseases. Of course, inflammatory bowel disease, immune disorders, and allergies. Honestly, I am biased. This is my specialty. I have been personally affected by this, and I've also chosen to research this, to do continuing education for this. But in my opinion, I feel like there is almost not a single disease or condition that cannot be even slightly improved by optimizing our gut health, whether that is function, immune, or gut microbiome, or all three. Doesn't even need to be related to the gut. That is more of a clinical opinion and from my, experience, but there is certainly a lot of research to support that as well. So let's talk about something so important. And again, I'm going to ask the audience to raise their hand for me. So how many of you, we mentioned we see gut health online, right? And on the media. So are you guys seeing more articles about things for gut health? Do this, don't do that. Are you seeing a lot of advice? I see somebody shaking their head. Anybody else can they speak to that? No, maybe? Okay. All right. Yeah. Did you want to say something? No. Okay. Changed your mind. All right. So the reason I bring that up, and this was why I made this slide in the first place, because today's presentation, we are specifically talking about optimal gut health for the average person, right? And there is a huge difference of what a healthy gut looks like, and then what is healthy for gut conditions. Okay, let me say that again, because it is so important. There is a huge difference if you have irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease, if you have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, if you have a dysbiosis, which means your bacteria is a little out of whack in your large intestine, or you have inflammation, right? That's actually what you're going to need is a lot different than what somebody who's just looking to optimize their gut is going to need. So for example, this is a Olipop soda. Anybody seen or heard of these? No. So these are really fun. They're prebiotic sodas. They are a great alternative for an alcoholic beverage. They're a great alternative for a soda, period, but they contain prebiotics. And we'll talk more about what prebiotics are, but these sodas can be an awesome addition to somebody's diet who's looking to optimize their gut health, but can create a whole bunch of symptoms for somebody who's got one or more of the conditions and diseases I just mentioned. So that's really hard, I think, for people to grasp sometimes. Additionally, garlic and onions, those are amazing sources of prebiotics. Again, I'll talk to you more about what prebiotics are later in the presentation. But for somebody with irritable bowel disease irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease, it can really set off days and days and days of symptoms. And then lastly, fermented foods, we're certainly going to address those. Similar concept. So for those of you here, for those of you watching, I really want to encourage you. If you have, so you might be thinking, Monica, how do I know if I have, any of the disorders or conditions you mentioned, or maybe one that you haven't mentioned? So go back to that very first definition. Are you experiencing uncomfortable digestive symptoms? Are you experiencing bloating, belching, indigestion, burning, gnawing, heartburn, that big bloated belly? Do you notice it when the day goes on and you eat, or do you notice it first thing in the morning? Any of those signs, changes in stool, more constipation, more diarrhea, maybe a mix of both, stool urgency. I could go on and on, but any of those things that have lasted more than 1 or 2 weeks, right? So they're not necessarily associated with medication use. Something's definitely off. Can be, perhaps maybe we would require further workup from your doctor. Can certainly meet with me or a dietitian who has experience and education in this space. So if you have any of those symptoms that I just mentioned, I would definitely continue listening, but some of the recommendations in here might actually exacerbate those symptoms. However, if you are a person that's got a little constipation, a little diarrhea, a little bloating, a little indigestion, right? It's all on a continuum. You are the perfect person to listen to this presentation and actually take what we learn in this presentation and apply it to your life. So it is a continuum, something that is actively changing your or interfering with your daily quality of life might be a little bit more moderate to severe. And we want to be careful and be strategic about how you go about introducing new foods and optimizing your gut, because we may need to address an underlying issue first. And sometimes that means actually taking out foods to get things to calm back down before you introduce all these amazing foods. Okay. All righty. So this is the beginning, the foundation of a healthy gut prescription. So no shocker, right? It's an anti-inflammatory diet. When I say diet, I do not mean diet like restrict your eating. I mean diet just as a word to sort of describe your eating behaviors. So it's mainly unprocessed, plant-rich, whole foods. So your gut craves whole grains, fruits, vegetables for a number of reasons. First and foremost, why we emphasize unprocessed, plant-rich whole foods is because those are going to be the foods that contain fiber. We're going to have a specific slide about fiber. And then plant compounds that are particularly anti-inflammatory, not just for the body. I often think that when we think about anti-inflammatory nutrition, we think about it in the context of lowering our cholesterol or arthritis. But I really want to encourage people to think about anti-inflammatory nutrition in the context of optimizing our gut. Additionally, we want to make sure we've got a wide variety of fruits and vegetables. I always say, if you can eat a diverse diet of plant foods, yes, fruits and vegetables, but honestly, even more than that, switch up, maybe 1 week you choose to cook with quinoa, maybe the next week it's farro, a wide variety of whole grains. If you can have a diverse diet, your gut microbiome will follow suit. You're more likely to have a diverse gut microbiome. And remember, that is one of the key pieces of having a healthy gut microbiome. And then we definitely want to emphasize protein. Okay, so protein, specifically protein that has healthy fats, such as your seafood, your tuna, your mackerel, your sardines. We want to get more of those in our diet. And then, of course, fats, avocados, extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, nuts, nut butter, flaxseed oil is particularly very anti-inflammatory for digestive health as well. So this is sort of the brief overview that, trust me, I have done presentations on an anti-inflammatory diet alone. So I did not want this to take up too much time, but I sort of want to think about this in the context of how we talked about earlier. And we talked about how everything needs to flow well to truly optimize your gut health. So what we want to aim to do when we think about an unprocessed, plant-rich, whole foods diet, yes, it definitely matters the types of foods you are choosing, right? We want them to be like some of the foods I mentioned here. We want it to be very diverse. I usually say aim for 8 different fruits and veggies per day. Before you say, how am I going to do that? I got you. And then 30 different fruits and vegetables per week. So how am I going to do that? All right. So it's a little bit easier than you may think. I don't necessarily mean that you need to have 8 different servings of fruits and vegetables, but I want you to think, okay, if I put a little bit of garlic in my soup and a little bit of onions in my soup or my stir fry and a little bit of shallots, that's 3 right there. How many of you make smoothies? How many of you make soups? How many of you make salads and sheet pan meals, right? So it's just about changing your frame of thinking to be, how can I get a little bit more of this veggie or this nut or this seed in here or this fruit, and not so much on the amount. So I'm not judging you based on how much you put in. It's more just getting the diversity. So again, we want to have that diversity. We want to make sure we're choosing unprocessed foods because those are going to be higher in those anti-inflammatory plant compounds as well as fiber. But then we want to make sure that we're pairing our meals well. So what does that mean? We want to make sure that we are pairing meals with a whole grain. We want to pair that with some sort of protein that can be dairy. Also, side note, did you notice that I didn't post gluten-free, dairy-free? There's your gut health prescription. Why? Because if you're looking to optimize your gut health and you don't have anything wrong or something that you know of as wrong, right? A condition, having a more restrictive diet can actually decrease the diversity of your gut microbiome. You are probably going to be less likely to have fiber. So things are going to be slower. You're going to be more backed up, right? Don't get me wrong. Sometimes that's appropriate, but I do just want to shout out that it's eat this, not take away this. Okay. So you want to balance it with the carbohydrates. You want to balance it with some sort of protein that can include dairy. And you want to make sure that the majority of the meal is fruits and or vegetables. Why? Because just by changing the way the composition of your meals, you can ensure that you're getting the plant compounds necessary to meet your vitamins and minerals. You can also ensure that you're getting those special anti-inflammatory compounds that are in these unprocessed plant foods at the amounts that are necessary to actually promote gut healing. So again, we want to make sure that we are balancing every single meal that we consume with a carb, a protein, and then the majority of that being the fruits or the vegetables, and certainly a little bit of healthy fat, whether that's a topping, whether that's something that we're cooking with, all is going to be very important. Okay, so I honestly made a prescription here. I wanted to show you this in a way that you could actually apply it to your life and think about it a little bit easier. Again, notice the language, notice what we're talking about. It's how can I get all these foods in? Not, oh my goodness, what do I need to take out? And remember, that is for the person with either mild to no symptoms looking to optimize their gut health. So Mediterranean diet, right? That's one of my personal favorite anti-inflammatory diets, but please don't feel that you need to eat according to the Mediterranean cuisine to support your gut health and eat well. In fact, any culture can sort of follow these principles, and that's really what counts. So again, thinking about those proteins, specifically the salmon and the tuna, because not only are they great protein sources, but they also have that omega-3 fatty acid, which has been shown to be beneficial in inflammation in our intestines. So we want to make sure that we're consuming that. Beans, 4 to 5 times a week, if not more. Why? Because beans are an amazing source of fiber. They've got some protein, and they also have those beneficial plant compounds as well. Poultry, limit, 2 to 3 times a week. You'll notice I don't mention beef or pork here. It's not because if you consume that somehow that's terrible for your gut. No, that's not what I mean. It's just that when we think about and we take a gut healthy diet and diet prescription, I don't want to just make it healthy for your gut. I want to consider all aspects. And we do know that limiting red meat and limiting pork is beneficial for heart health and metabolic health as well. Again, the 8 different fruits and vegetables daily, even if it's a little bit of garlic in your saute pan, that counts as 1. And we want to total that to 30 different fruits and vegetables weekly. We want to try to have 35 grams or more of fiber a day. That sounds intense. And I can guarantee you, once you get going and once you switch over and start introducing more unprocessed foods into your diet, it is going to be easier than you think. We are going to talk about why fiber is so important, but what I do want to mention here is, while I'm not a big fan of tracking, sometimes it might be wise to track your meals 4 to 5 times in a week and look at how much fiber you are consuming. Majority of Americans are not even consuming half of that. That is a real statistic. Majority are not even consuming half of what is recommended for a gut healthy diet. So my recommendation, eat like normal, track, because then you have an established baseline. You have somewhere where you can go. And I find that to be the most helpful, to encourage people to actually increase fiber. So, okay, I know where I was consuming 15 grams per day. I made some adjustments, boom, I'm up to 25. Monica says 35. I know how I can do this. Minimum 2 tablespoons extra virgin olive oil daily. We certainly want to encourage extra virgin olive oil as the primary source of healthy fats. However, I do encourage extra virgin olive oil to be either used raw or cooked at a low heat, because we don't want to degrade that specific anti-inflammatory compound called oleocanthal, which actually works on the same metabolic pathway as ibuprofen does. So really think about food as your medicine. Extra virgin olive oil is a beautiful example of that. Additionally, we want a minimum of 2 servings of whole grains per day, and then regular use of dairy. And again, whole grains, of course, if you don't have celiac, known gluten intolerance, they don't necessarily need to be gluten-free. In fact, I encourage, a wide variety, as mentioned. I'm really driving that point home, of foods, and some can have gluten and some, may not. And then, of course, regular use of dairy. Again, there has been some research that shows that people who consume dairy have more diverse gut microbiomes. But more importantly than that, again, when I make something, I'm not just thinking only in my gut health, mind. I'm thinking about overall health. And so I do know that regular use of dairy, making sure we're getting our calcium in. Also, calcium can be supportive for inflammation in the intestines as well. So getting that regular intake of calcium. And we also do know that dairy is an excellent source of protein. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about prebiotics. So prebiotics maybe is a familiar term. Prebiotics, probiotics, we will address both. So prebiotics are actually naturally found in your fruits and vegetables. Okay, so I just want to draw everyone's attention. Every supplement, every powder, anything that they're selling you, it has prebiotics. Guess what? Go to your local grocery store, they have prebiotics. And they have prebiotics that are more beneficial to your gut microbiome than the prebiotics that you're going to find in just a regular old, capsule, supplement, powder, you name it. So interestingly to know that prebiotics are not found in all fruits and vegetables, okay? So we are specifically talking about fruits here. So prebiotics are only found, they're a special type of fiber, okay? So not every fiber is a prebiotic. Fiber is important and good all on its own, and I will talk to you about why, but prebiotics are the food that our bacteria and our gut microbiome feed off of, if you can remember back to earlier in the presentation, to actually produce what's called short chain fatty acids and go ahead and cross into the get from the intestine into our blood and have beneficial effects throughout our body, such as anti-inflammatory effects, improvements in mental health, and so on and so forth. So my favorite prebiotics are banana, grapefruit, watermelon, white peaches, custard apples, and blueberries. So those are all good sources of prebiotics. And of course, don't forget the diversity, right? Just because something doesn't have prebiotics does not mean that it still will not, it's not going to benefit your gut health. It certainly will. Okay, now let's switch gears and talk a little bit more about vegetables. Important to note that vegetables are a little bit easier to get in your prebiotics. So same thing applies, right? Chicory root, dandelion, garlic, onion, leeks, cabbage, artichokes are all good sources of prebiotics. So we want to make sure, particularly that we're getting these in daily, okay? At least one or more sources. And that's sort of why we have the recommendations that we do. So to encourage you to get them in without counting. And then of course, we still want to keep up with our leafy green vegetables and our cruciferous vegetables, being the Brussels sprouts, the cabbage, leafy green, kale, spinach, so on, all very important. One thing I want to mention is that, how I mentioned the Olipop, that drink that had prebiotics, that is actually made from a chicory root. So they're able to extract the prebiotics that are found in some of our vegetables, and then they put them in drinks or supplements or, these functional foods. And so again, it doesn't mean that it's bad for you, but it's certainly not a replacement. So you are not going to get the same benefit of the foods first approach with the prebiotics if you are only consuming supplements, powders, and so on. It can certainly be integrated. In fact, that is usually what I recommend for somebody who's got maybe more mild bloating, mild constipation, diarrhea, right? We want to optimize our diet by increasing the diversity, by getting more of these prebiotic foods in, and then perhaps we add a supplement to help. Because there are some specific supplements that I recommend in the work that I do at RVNAhealth that selectively feed the beneficial bacteria, right? So these are not necessarily selective, but there are some supplements that can be used as sort of an adjunct approach to getting more prebiotics in. And that would be my recommendation if you have more mild symptoms. Again, if you have those moderate, severe symptoms, we got to talk later. And if you have no symptoms, you're probably okay just increasing the diversity as well as the prebiotics in your diet. All right, fiber. I told you I would talk about it. That should say 35 grams a day. Ignore that it says 25. I apologize for that. Listen, I'll tell you this, if you're going to get 25 grams, that's pretty good. But to really optimize your gut health, should be 35. So that range is where we want to be. So why is fiber so important? So it has many different roles in the GI tract. The first one is, and you may not think that this is as important for gut health, but it actually optimizes our blood sugar. So it supports our health in other ways. When we get fiber from our fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, legumes, seeds, we are slowing down digestion. Okay, we're actually, which is beneficial. It allows our body to adequately absorb sugar a little bit more slowly. So we're not having those blood sugar spikes, which is very, very important. Again, fiber, some fibers are prebiotics. So then they go down into our digestive system where they can be used for food for our bacteria on our gut microbiome. And it's ultimately really important because fiber, again, tends to have those beneficial plant compounds that are anti-inflammatory. And that can sort of go into the blood, that blood barrier, and go ahead and have beneficial effects in the rest of our body. Additionally, so first thing, so fiber slows down that digestion, which is beneficial. I also, specifically beneficial for people who have fast transit, right? Maybe prone to loose stools. But you know what I like to say, and this sort of shocks people, I say that fiber is the ultimate regulator. What does that mean? So yeah, I just said it can be very beneficial for somebody who's got loose stools, diarrhea. It can also be very beneficial for somebody that's got constipation. It feels weird. It feels counterintuitive. If they've got constipation and they've got diarrhea, why are you both telling them to increase their fiber? Well, it is, like I said, the ultimate regulator. So before you go ahead and you try something over the counter, first things first is I would really recommend increasing the fiber from your diet to help normalize your stools. So as mentioned, it does that by sort of slowing down digestion, allowing for proper absorption of sugar, which helps balance our blood sugar. And it also sort of helps the reabsorption of water. So certain types of fiber can help thicken up your stools. Now, again, if you're more mild to moderate with your symptoms, there is specific types of fiber that can actually help you. So again, another ultimate regulator, this is over the counter. It's called partially hydrolyzed guar gum. Can be beneficial. It's a type of fiber. People are looking at me weird, but it's a very non-irritating type of fiber. So if you do have SIBO, bless you, if you do have IBS or any of the GI diseases or conditions I mentioned earlier, it will not irritate you. It's unlikely that it will bind you up, but it will actually, again, help either with constipation or diarrhea. So I do recommend that if that's something that you think you need. But of course, please start with a foods first approach. Other different types of fibers that can be beneficial is psyllium. That's a type of fiber you can get over the counter. But again, it's the same sort of idea. It's that, yes, they can be used as an adjunct therapy to help, but they should not be your only source of fiber. So say you're getting 25 grams from your food, no more than 10 grams should be from an additional supplement that you're going to get over the counter. And again, if you are somebody that has, you have no symptoms and or you've got very mild symptoms, definitely focus on increasing your fiber. If you've got more mild to moderate and so on, perhaps trying a very low dose of the partially hydrolyzed guar gum fiber that I mentioned and seeing if that improves your stools, either, ideally making you more regular so the frequency is better, and making the form, so the actual stool better, a healthier looking stool, which I wish I actually do have a slide that I talk through with all my clients. No, it's not real pictures. Well, thank God. But it's little graphics, and honestly, so helpful. Because honestly, how many of us know what normal stools even look like? You don't, right? I didn't until I, became a dietitian. So I do wish I posted that. Another consideration with fiber, one thing I want to say, whether it is going to be from food or whether you're leaving here thinking, okay, I really got to increase my fiber, and you're going to increase it from food and or supplements, do it slow. You will want to kill me if you are eating 15 grams of fiber, which is about the average for most Americans. Like Monica told me, I have to eat my fiber in. So you start throwing all these foods in, and all of a sudden the next day you're up to 25, 30 grams. You are going to be on the toilet cussing me out. We do not want that. I want you to gradually increase the fiber so you cannot have any symptoms, but you still get all those beneficial effects. Okay. All right. And lastly, as it relates to food, we've got fermented foods. So I want to talk to you guys about something that's going to surprise you. Fermented foods are not probiotics. What? Okay. In order to know what I mean when I say that, we need to know what the definition of probiotics is. And it's a beneficial effect from a live microorganism that has a studied benefit on the host, right? We are the host of the organism. So the reason I say that fermented foods are not probiotics is because all these fermented foods haven't necessarily been studied. Do they contain live and active microorganisms? Absolutely they do. But they haven't necessarily been studied to prove their health benefit. So we can't necessarily say, oh, if you eat this kraut, you're gonna have, this much more growth of this bacteria in your gut. What we can say though, is that fermented foods are incredibly healthy. They have been shown to increase the diversity of your bacteria alone, which is impressive and in not a long time to do. Remember, your gut microbiome is something that actually has been influenced since birth. So to know that we can change the diversity of our gut microbiome, which is the key token or one of the key tokens for a healthy gut microbiome, that's awesome. So that is really important. We know that it can, as mentioned, increase the diversity and also decrease systemic inflammation, which is awesome, but it's not technically a probiotic. So the reason I say that is if you want to consume I would say anywhere from 1 to 3 servings, and I would say even about like a tablespoon is a serving of a fermented food. So you can do miso. One thing that I do want to draw your attention to that, remember, live and active microorganisms that have the benefit on your gut health. So if you're cooking these at high heat, I've cooked mac and cheese kimchi before, it was great, but I had to saute the kimchi really, really high. There was no live and active microorganisms in there anymore, right? So if you're using your miso and you're not putting it in last, you're cooking with your miso or you're frying up your kimchi, there is no live and active microorganisms in there anymore. So important to note, you want to have, about anywhere from 1 to 4 tablespoon size servings of fermented foods per day. You can do more. Okay, it's one of those things. I am not really, the limit does not exist. I'm sure it does, but not that I know of or not that has been studied. Of course, you might experience a little bloating, but it is very beneficial for your gut microbiome. So integrating fermented foods on a daily basis, here are some easy ones, but there are some other options as well. Now, you may see in the grocery store, but Monica, I saw Stonyfield has a yogurt and it says probiotics. You'd be right. And that is because they actually add in the probiotics into their yogurt, right? So the way I want you to think about it is fermented foods are the live and active microorganisms, but in order for them to be a probiotic, they need to be in a specific amount and a specific strain that has been studied and had some proven benefit, okay? So you can certainly increase your intake of fermented foods and take a probiotic if you feel like that would benefit you. Now, on the topic of probiotics, on the topic of probiotics, not everybody needs a probiotic. So my recommendation to you, if you have minimal to mild symptoms, that are just, the symptoms that we experience because we're a human being, I don't think you need to run and go get a probiotic. Now, if you are interested in a probiotic, and that is why you might be wondering, Monica, why don't you have a slide about probiotics? Here is why. I want to make sure that A probiotic will help you and is necessary. And B, I want to steer you in the right direction to to recommend a probiotic that has been clinically studied to support what you are trying to optimize or change. So for example, there is some research in probiotics for constipation, for diarrhea, for poor inflammation, you name it. And that's the one that we want to recommend. So somebody asked me about Culturelle earlier, and before I would say, is that a good probiotic? Is that a bad probiotic? I would first want to know, well, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to do with it? And what are your symptoms? I would then say, have you increased the diversity of your foods? Have you switched, are you eating more unprocessed plant-based foods? How much fiber are you having per day? How many servings of fermented foods are you having per day? Are your meals balanced? If you could not answer those questions as, oh, I'm working on it or improving it, I would not go ahead and run into getting a probiotic. So there are some gut-specific nutrients that I did want to highlight. That is omega-3 fatty acids. So those are the healthy fats that are found in your fish, your tuna. They're also found in your flax seeds, your chia seeds. So what I love about these is it's fairly easy to get these omega-3 fatty acids into the diet. However, supplements are usually very safe, and I do recommend those. Of course, either check with a clinician you are working with before you start a supplement. But omega-3 fatty acids can be very beneficial for inflammation. Glutathione actually is very beneficial. It is found in broccoli sprouts, and it is very anti-inflammatory. So it's one of those nutrients that you can find in your foods. I usually recommend 2/3 cups of broccoli sprouts per day. Listen, I know that's a lot. That's not reasonable for everybody. So even just doing a little bit of broccoli sprouts in your diet would be beneficial. Curcumin, so that of course you can find, some people are on that already for their joints. That's been shown to be beneficial. Vitamin D as well. So shown to improve the gut barrier function and immune modulating functions. Green tea, of course, at the bottom, go ahead and it supports inflammation and has been shown to aid in the removal of negative bacteria in the stomach, like H. pylori in particular. And then, of course, extra virgin olive oil has been shown to improve gut barrier function and overall immune health. So there is a wide range of gut-specific nutrients we could introduce, whether, again, it's a combination of diet and supplement. As you've noted, most of these foods you can get through the diet. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to address MCT oil. MCT oil is coconut. It is a coconut oil, medium chain triglyceride oil, and that has been shown to actually decrease constipation. So maybe you want to try half a tablespoon a day, work your way up and see if that works for you. It also works to improve the gut barrier function as well. So it's got two uses. But as I was mentioning, there are so many gut-specific nutrients that we could address or increase in the diet. But again, we don't want to just throw all these different things to it. We really want to be smart, start with the food. And again, if you are that person experiencing moderate to severe symptoms, got to see a doctor, need to see a dietitian. We really need to do the work. So then when we make these types of recommendations, we know that you are actually going to benefit from them. And again, just to state that these are gut-specific nutrients for the sort of average healthy person that you can start incorporating in your diet via, preferably foods first, but also in little supplement forms if that's something that you prefer. So of course, movement, this sort of goes without saying, but physical activity increases the blood flow to the muscles of our digestive system and helps food move through. So if you are somebody that finds yourself more bloated, more constipated, certainly going on walks about 10 minutes after your meals can help things move through. So this really cannot be understated, but I do want to be mindful of time. But I do recommend daily activity, and particularly movement after you are walking. And then, of course, lifestyle. So this cannot be understated as well. We know that there are more things that to optimize our gut health than just nutrition and supplements alone. Of course, that is exercise and lifestyle. So my recommendation is get 15 minutes of sunlight in the first half of the day. That's been shown to increase serotonin. Really want to have consistency with sleep. You can limit your screen time and limit caffeine consumption. So having your last cup of coffee after 1 can be very beneficial for more regular sleep because caffeine is a long half-life. And if you are having coffee after 1 o'clock, it could be staying in your system longer, disrupting your sleep. And it is a more indirect pathway when we think about sleep and our gut health, but there certainly is research to support how we can optimize or change our life to optimize our gut health. Last thing I want to say is going back to that bidirectional communication between our gut and our brain, is that there is for people with bloating or constipation or more, that moderate to severe symptoms, there is actually something called gut-directed hypnotherapy, and it is specific evidence-based meditation program that you do 15 minutes of meditation per day, and it sort of improves the communication for which your gut and your brain talk to each other. So that can be very beneficial as well for some people. So here's just some hard truths before we wrap up. All of these things that you're seeing online, right? Gluten-free, dairy-free, you name it, especially encouraged by people who maybe have done the diet themselves and it worked for them, encouraged by people who are not necessarily clinicians, licensed clinicians, and are a registered dietitian or, alike. It's everything that they are encouraging or promoting is just a fad diet rebranded, right? I don't know about you, but I know younger people, I see more and more. It actually cracks me up. There is gut health is now a better way to say, hey, here's how to lose weight. There's just a lot of misinformation, like take out gluten, take out dairy, do all these things, and that's how your gut health will improve. So I really just want to warn you and let you know there is a ton of misinformation out there, but really all it is just fad diets rebranded. One food will never ever make or break your health. So again, speaking to what we see online, buy this supplements and all my migraines, my fatigue, my whatever went away. My life is better. I make $1 million a year. No, that doesn't happen. Okay. And similarly, one supplement alone will never, ever make or break your gut health. It needs to be done in a strategic way that is centered and geared towards your specific conditions, lifestyle, and what exactly you have going on. So again, a gut symptoms nutrition plan, there is none. There is no one plan heals all. Major red flag if you're seeing articles, if you are seeing people selling you programs, it does not exist. Absolutely see a doctor and see a dietitian. I will say that I do work with people one-on-one in RVNAhealth. Again, this is my area of expertise. And we also have an interactive cooking class May 19th. That is at the RVNAhealth Kitchen. So we're going to be doing interactive cooking. We're going to get a gut health toolkit, and we're going to go more into depth on people who may be experiencing that more mild to moderate symptoms, what we can do to actually improve those symptoms. So if you're interested, please let me know. Love to get you signed up. I think we've got about 5 signups left. And if you're interested in more individualized counseling and do not have a diagnosis, don't worry. I work with you and your doctor to see what is going on before we make all these recommendations. And we can certainly do some optimizing in the meantime in a way that is strategic and more efficient and effective. So thank you guys for being a very attentive, wonderful audience. I would love to take questions if you have any. Great question. So there's a few different ways. If you are lactose intolerant, my recommendation is to choose lactose-free. So Lactaid in particular is a beneficial, it's a brand that has no lactose, so you can drink it and you'll be fine. There's Lactaid yogurt. I think they've got sour cream, they've got ice cream. Other brands is also Fairlife. They're my personal favorite. Fairlife also has the lactase enzyme in the food so that your body doesn't need the lactase enzyme. Kefir is a fermented yogurt drink. So it is a dairy product. It's fermented. It tastes a little bitter, a little sour, but it is considered a fermented food. So if you're thinking about how much fermented food we want to get in the diet, that could be something you could add in, certainly. Kefir is a little different. That's a good question. So I would recommend 1 to 3 tablespoons of your, like the miso, the sauerkraut, the kimchi, but I would probably do like at least 4 ounces. I just usually recommend like a Greek yogurt, no particular brand comes out. In terms of calcium, I know that Noosa, Noosa, has high calcium and they are, I believe, a Greek yogurt as well. I usually recommend like a low fat, moderate fat. If you're thinking Faye, I think like 2% is a good number. You don't want to do no fat. That's not necessary and it doesn't taste good. It's like sour cream. And I do recommend plain. So I would always recommend plain. And then I would just recommend sweetening them yourself. You're going to get way less sugar. Do like 1 tablespoon of maple syrup or honey. And I actually recommend maple syrup and make sure you're adding in all those berries and natural fruit because you're going to get the fiber and those beneficial plant compounds that we talked about. And you're getting significantly less sugar and it's going to taste better. So that's my recommendation.
Can I just like walk into the RVNA and like make an appointment with you?
Yes, you could definitely do that. We've expanded a lot. So we absolutely still do include, and I would say our main thing, Trisha, tell me if I'm wrong, is the home nursing care. But we do have a outpatient rehab facility. So if you broke your knee tomorrow, I hope you don't, and you needed to get therapy, you could absolutely come to our outpatient rehab center. If you wanted to know how to use nutrition to heal up your broken knee, you could then come schedule an appointment with me. So sort of like I said, it's hard for me to make that judgment call. I would first ask yourself those 5 questions. How's my diversity? How's my fiber? How's my all of this? And then think about, well, what do I want the probiotics for? Do I just want to feel better? Do I want to go to the bathroom better? Right. So I would need to know a little bit more about you specifically to know if that brand is appropriate. And like I said, too, probiotics are not always recommended unless there's an actual reason for them to be implemented. Generally, I do agree with you. There is a lot of people that say you need a lot, they recommend a lot more water than I think you need. Make sure you're getting about 8 cups a day minimum. Water is very important. Absolutely. If 8 cups is unreasonable, start with just 4 or 5 cups. It actually gets increasingly important as you age because the risk of dehydration significantly increases and you don't have that same perceived thirst as you once did. So establishing a hydration schedule can be important. So stevia is a plant-based 0-calorie sweetener, meaning that it's not necessarily absorbed into our bloodstream. So it's 0 calories. But just because something is not necessarily absorbed into our bloodstream, like the sugar-free sweeteners, doesn't mean that it's not disrupting our gut microbiome. So actually, I'm glad they brought this up because aspartame, sucralose, sweet and low, you name it, are known gut microbiome disruptants. So I would always recommend a honey or a maple syrup or whatever as a more natural sweetener. Stevia is okay if as long as they're not drinking it like stevia sweetened beverages all throughout the day, it's an okay thing. It's totally okay. It's not a known gut microbiome disruptant like the others are.